Well, welcome everyone to our Meet Your Legislators event. I'm Hannah Lumpkin, Advocacy Director for the League of Women Voters of Boulder County. First, right off, I want to thank Stephanie and her husband Trent, owners of Rule 4, for opening up this space. Just please be sure that you've got plates, cups, or pick up after yourself on the way out. Make it easy for us after we're done. So the League is a nonpartisan political organization run by volunteers like you and me. While we never endorse candidates or political parties, we do have policy positions and will take stances on proposed legislation and ballot initiatives. During general and primary elections, go to vote411.org for nonpartisan information on candidates and ballot issues. Now, the League isn't just for women, everyone is welcome. And we have members that pay dues and may or may not go to events. And then we have some that get involved on issue teams and help out with voter service or serve on the board. Whatever your challenges are, we'll find a spot for them. So if you'd like to help us make democracy work, you can talk to me, a member of our membership team, or go to our website at lwbc.org. Just so you know, the event is being recorded, and I will be posted on our YouTube channel next week sometime. And feel free to grab another cup of coffee or snack during the event, and in case you haven't already discovered the bathroom at the back on the right hand side.
Press which button?
One other note, parking on this side of the building is just fine, unlimited, no worries. Parking on this side is subject to city parking rules. I think there's a time limit, and it was paid parking, I'm told, so keep an eye on it, or if you haven't done the mobile parking payment, then you might want to take care of that. All right, so here we are on January 6th, 2024, 3 years after the shocking events at our nation's capital. And I know we want to get on with the legislators, but I do want to take a moment to read some excerpts from a January 2021 press release from Karen Sheik, who was then president of the Colorado League. The past year was filled with an unrelenting series of challenges in our country, prompting all to enthusiastically bring out the old and bring in the new year. We welcomed 2021 with high hopes that this would be a better year. And then came January 6th and the events at the nation's capital. Only one other time in our history had the capital come under siege, and we watched in horror and disbelief because this siege occurred at the hands of our citizens. As one of our LWB CEO board members stated at a recent board meeting, democracy is a social contract in which both parties come together for the greater good and have faith in the other that they both want the same thing. To do this, we have to be willing to really listen to one another. It is every American's civic duty to dial down the heat. Continuing to cry the election was stolen or to appear to vote that your candidate won is not helpful. If we truly love this remarkable experiment in democracy as much as we say, it's time to get down to the hard work of achieving the ideal and not just talking about it or suggesting that all is lost if the other side wins. So today, I ask you that we keep Karen's words in mind as we gather to hear from and ask questions of our state senators and representatives that are so graciously joining us today. Listen, be respectful of each other, and aspire to come together for the greater good of democracy. Now, I want to introduce to you Tim Waters, who has graciously agreed to be our moderator today. Tim served for 5 years on the Longmont City Council and twice represented the 4th Congressional District on the Colorado Commission for Higher Education. I first met him at a Doing Democracy Day up in Longmont, the high schools. And I'm delighted that he can join us here today. Thank you.
My stand, so we can start, Mr. Steve. Senator, well, yes, just crowds that You're welcome. You're welcome. We'll be happy to share. So thanks to the lady for what you do all the time. In particular, what you're doing today to give voters, residents a chance to meet firsthand and hear from their elected representatives. I know what you do in partnership with elected officials at every level. As a former council member, I know how much I appreciated the work of the league, the issues we were taking on Longmont, and I know that it continues day in and day out at every level. To our elected representatives, with your schedules, with a session coming up, I know what your lives have to be like. So thanks for squeezing time out of your schedules this morning, and more importantly, squeezing time out of your life to serve the public the way you do. It's not easy. And I want to say thank you just for it. If we're doing anything else today, just for that. So thank you so much. You know these names and faces, I suspect, and I'm just gonna run down the list and do an introduction. And then I'm gonna follow that with, I only have 2 questions that I'm gonna start. And then we're gonna turn it over to the audience. So think about your questions. Now, if we run out of questions, I have another list of questions that are a little more educated. But this is really about giving you a chance to share with us your priorities. So Senators, Stephen Fenberg, Sonya Jaquez Lewis, and Senator Marchman, Representatives Parenti, Karen McCormick, Amabile, Junie Joseph, and I'm sorry, Representative Here's the first thing. Real quick, I know you've been working on bills, you've been thinking about this for months. You've got your ideas submitted, it's in that process of being vetted, and you'll have bill numbers on some, and you'll connect with other ideas. It's just down the line, not so much bills, but big ideas, your priorities. What are your top priorities going into this legislative session? And we'll just work right down the line. Senator, take it away.
All right. Is this on?
Yep.
Yeah. So thank you all so much, and agreed with everything that has been said so far. I think it is fitting to have a League of Women Voters event on this anniversary. League of Women Voters and organizations like it, I think, are the antidote to something like that from never happening again, and making sure they have a strong democracy. So thank you all for being here. In terms of priorities, I would just say quickly, legislative session is fast and furious. It's 120 days, and we will touch upon literally every issue you could possibly think. But if I were to say what I think the top 3 priorities and themes of the session are, it would be housing, more of it, and doing what we can to ensure that we're on a stronger path to having a Colorado that is growing in a way that is equitable, affordable for everybody. Secondly, I would say, which goes along with housing, in big investments in more transportation options, which I think goes hand in hand with housing, and I would put at the very top of that list. Finally getting front range Northwest rail in our region, but having it be a part of a larger statewide system. That finally gives us a true statewide transportation system. And then third, like it is every year, education will be a top priority, but this year specifically, I think related to that, will be finally ending the budget stabilization factor, fully funding education in the manner that our Constitution requires, that is what students and teachers and communities deserve. And then hopefully being able to dream bigger after we get to that point where we just simply fund education at a minimal adequate level. Those are, I think, the 3 big themes that we're going to fight over, talk about, celebrate, discuss, and hopefully at the end of this,
Thank you, Steve. Steve, as our Senate President, has really led the way for many of us working on so many different issues, and I'll echo his comments. I think, and by the way, let me start with saying, do we have anyone here from Longmont, Erie, Lafayette. Okay, great, wow, okay, this is perfect, well, you know how to reach me. I represent those wonderful communities and have lived in this area for 25 years. So, I guess I want to say, first of all, I agree with the comments about protecting democracy. I think in Colorado, we've done so much to make sure that everyone can vote and make it as easy as possible. And wow, when you reschedule something to be on January 6th, the day that everyone is focusing on democracy, good planning there. We'll continue that work for sure. I would also say and echo the comments that President Fenberg said about housing. That was our theme last year. We didn't quite get it done. I know I actually served on the Senate Local Government and Housing Committee, and it's a big priority in my neck of the woods. In 2013, when the floods happened, I was serving on the Boulder County Board of Health, and we had many Latina families displaced, dozens and dozens, and we're still dealing with that. And then I was the senator for Louisville when the Marshall Fire happened. So it's really acutely being felt here, affordable housing. So I know I'm working on accessory dwelling units, ADUs. Worked a lot on that last session, didn't quite get it, to where we wanted it to be. Hoping to work on that again this year. I know Representative Amabile is also, hopefully we can do some combined efforts there. The other area I want to touch on is community safety. I think you're going to see a lot of people very concerned and wanting to work on preventing gun violence in our community. When I first ran in 2018, I pledged to work on GVP bills, as we call them. Every single year I've introduced a bill, and you'll see a few of those pieces of legislation again this year. I think it's really important. And then as a pharmacist, I'm going to be focusing also on healthcare. Prescription drug costs are ridiculous. It is really, there isn't a week that goes by that either a former patient that I've worked with or constituent, they always contact me about, I can't afford this medication. So you're going to see some bills around health insurance and prescription drug costs, and we just have to keep that up. It's just a huge issue. Before I pass it over to my dear friend and colleague, Senator Marchman, I did want to do a shout out to people that are still continuing to work in the community, but maybe not in the Capitol. And that would be Stephanie Walton is here. She's a former Lafayette City Council member, and she is still continuing work in the community, which I think is outstanding. And we also have Don Hadid in the back, superintendent for St. Green. And we have Pete Salas was here. Pete Salas has worked on diversity and inclusiveness in Boulder County for years. And Mark Rosen is here, who's a wonderful policy analyst with Boulder County. I always like to recognize the folks that maybe aren't sitting here, but are really doing the work, because it's really a team effort. So thanks for having me do that.
Great, thank you. I'm Janice Marchman. I am a teacher. I teach middle school in Loveland, and so it is not a surprise. The majority of the bills focus around kids and their education and their health. So the majority of the bills that I'm bringing forth are around school-based health centers, expanding them, getting more funding to them. There's a big push federally to do that. So that's one of the things I'm working on, that's a pre-filed bill. Also working on getting a license for outdoor nature-based preschools. This came to me directly from Boulder County. We've got, dozens of outdoor nature-based preschools that are fantastic for neurodivergent kiddos and others, but really good for these kiddos who don't do well learning how to sit on carpet when they're 4. And so trying to find a license for them. The other committee is I'm the vice chair of the Senate Education Committee, and it's a joy that I get to do that. What it means is I just get to see all the bills come through there, and I get to learn from and share how I chair a meeting. The other committee I serve on is PAC. And so my other big bill that I'm bringing is about ag mental health. Our farmers, our producers, our ranchers are responsible for our food production, and they are very much suffering in so many ways. Just the nature of being a farmer or producer. So this is a really exciting partnership between the Behavioral Health Administration and the Colorado Department of Ag, and they came along to join us. So I hope it is something that's useful for our farmers. And I'm hearing a ton of amazing bills from the House. So I'm gonna pass on. Thank you.
Good morning, Jennifer Parenti, I represent House District 19, which is to the east of here, Erie, Frederick, Firestone, and Pocono, and then a little bit of Longmont, unincorporated Boulder County. I think just in terms of the question of general themes, echo, my colleagues, housing. I'm looking at that space more from the, let's not forget to talk about the issue of both taxes, which of course have been on everyone's mind, but also insurance. Homeowners insurance premiums are skyrocketing, business insurance premiums are skyrocketing, and also ensuring that as we push towards more housing, that we are not sacrificing quality as we do it, because that just ends up costing more people more in the long run. Yes, on protecting democracy, you will see several bills, this year in that space. We can talk a little bit about them later, and also securing or at least cementing those rights that we have very long enjoyed here in Colorado, but are not necessarily protected by law, right? So here I'm talking about gay marriage, I'm talking about abortion rights, I'm talking about a lot of things that we have here in Colorado, but I know people want to make sure are really secure. And I would definitely echo the comments about transportation. I live in a transportation desert. A lot of Boulder County lives in a transportation desert, but many of the folks in the cities are doing okay. We want to make sure that that really expands out to increase coverage. So, thank you.
Thank you all. My name is Karen McCormick, and I am the representative for House District 11, which is most of the city of Longmont, just pretty much follows the city limits, except for slides on the eastern border that I showed with Representative Parenti. This is my fourth session, and I am honored to be the chair of the House Agriculture, Water, and Natural Resources Committee. And through the last 3 years, I've just learned a lot in this space. My background is as a veterinarian, and I was really anxious to be on the Agriculture Committee. My overall big themes have to do with some of the reasons I ran in the first place, and number one is healthcare, and how do we continue to address not only the cost of healthcare, but access to healthcare. And last year we did have a bill in the space that didn't make it all the way through the process that is going to come out the gate first as soon as possible, where we're going to look at more of an in-detail study of how our state might be able to may or may not be able to set up a healthcare payment system that is a single payer type system. We need a more detailed look at if that's even possible and answer all the questions that still remain so that we can have that discussion with our constituents. What goes along with housing and transportation and economic growth is water. And I am also very focused on how do we protect the water of our state, how do we plan as smartly as possible for the population growth that we are going to see over the next 20 to 50 years. We only get so much water, and it comes from the sky. we don't have any other place to get it. And so making sure that we are fully funding our water plan and making sure that we are have a strong voice for our state with the other states in the region that we share the Colorado River resources with is going to be a priority of mine. And as we build housing and density, that we're really cognizant of the water needs for all the people, and that we are looking for how to conserve that water, how to be incredibly efficient, and where we can look to not waste it anymore.
I'm also focused on education and great to partner with, some of the folks here on how we can, help some of the kiddos that need special education, how we can get more teachers to, have an additional pathway to get their special ed endorsement on their license. And so that's something that I'm really excited to work with others on. So healthcare, water, and education are gonna be some of my big themes, and yes, we have tons more to talk about, but super excited to get going, and I know we're all feel really anxious, we kind of want Wednesday to hurry up and get here, and I also. Yes, we do.
None of us agree with that.
It's, you know, if you say it enough, we'll start believing it. So, and I do want to also echo the January 6th. I want to recognize that. I heard something, I think it might have been on the radio, that democracy can't survive at the end of a, you know, at gunpoint. And so we really have to make sure that we have a strong foundation for our democracy and that we're not running scared in this country. So thank you all for your invitation. I'll pass it to my good friend.
Thank you. Thank you guys all for being here. It's a really great crowd and it's a beautiful day. So I know you're welcome to doing other things and I appreciate you taking the time to spend with us. I mentioned to the organizers that we don't really get that many opportunities to talk to people, to our constituents. And they were like, oh, don't you do it all the time? But we really don't. And so I really value the opportunity to answer your questions and to tell you what we're up to and to hear from you what you wish you would be up to. So for me, I think many of you know, I have a big focus on mental health. And that is because I have a son who has schizophrenia with bipolar disorder, substance use disorder, has been homeless and has been criminal justice involved. And that informs a lot of what I work on. So this summer I was on 3 interim committees, the chair of 2 of those that are kind of around that topic. And we have a bunch of bills coming out of those committees that I'll be carrying in the House. And one of the things that one of the committees was really focused on is having statewide jail standards. And this is a whole new thing for our state, and I know many of you probably don't really hear about it, but it is actually a big deal that for the first time, we will have statewide standards that our jails have to adhere to, so that we know people who work in the jails and people who are held in the jails are being treated with some minimal standards. And hopefully that bill will get passed this year. Pretty exciting for me. I'm also working on a social media bill that is about how can we help parents to help their kids use social media in a healthy way. And I know the governor was on TV saying, hey, that's up to the parents, that's not up to the state. But I do think there are some things we could do that would actually help the parents help the kids, and that it is incumbent on us to do that. So I'm working on that issue. Also working on housing and, you know, I mean, honestly, it is a little bit crazy, but my interest in accessory dwelling units started again with my own family. This was a place, I built one above my garage, and it was illegal. I didn't know. I kind of didn't know, but anyway, so I needed a place for my disabled son to live, and he could not live with us. And any of you who have a person in your family who suffers understands why that might be. And so we hired an in shower and a little teeny kitchen, and he lived there for about 6 months. And then the city came and said, no, you have to tear all this out. He can't even sleep here. And that's when he was homeless. And because it happened immediately, and it took us a while to figure out what was the next thing. So he spent about 3 months, both at the homeless shelter and living on the street. And I feel very strongly that I should be able to use my property to take care of my family, however that might play out, as long as we're not a nuisance to our neighbors. And
So that's a lot of why I'm interested in seeing us have good, sane policy around accessory dwelling units across the state. And then I am the chair of the business committee. And, because I ran a business here in Boulder for 25 years. And we take on a lot of really sexy stuff like insurance, banking, credit unions, and other things like that. So we'll be working on a lot of those policies. Thanks. Oh, I wanted to say one other thing too. A lot of my bills are bipartisan, and I think it is really important for us to dial down the rhetoric and for us to work across the aisle to talk to each other. And I think that, you know, what doesn't get said, 88% of our bills last session had some bipartisan support. And no one talks about that, but it is a really big deal, and it's a big deal for me. And so a whole bunch of the bills that I'm the prime sponsor of, I have Republican co-prime sponsors. And I think that is going to help us to make a difference going into the future. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Junie Joseph. I am the representative for House District 10 and Boulder. And I just wanted to say as well, I just had a oral surgery last week. I have 14 removed. I'm excited to be here, but if I look like I'm mean mugging, I'm not. It's time to deal with the oral surgery. I'm excited to be here. I've been a representative for about 1 year. I was on city council before. I appreciate some of the comments that were made about some of the issues that we care deeply about that we will be working on this next session. Housing is extremely important to me as well. I'm a renter here in Boulder on city council. I supported housing affordability, and I will certainly be supporting that more as a state representative. And also, again, transportation. If we're talking about climate change and climate resiliency, transportation plays a big part into that. So I'll be supporting that type of legislation as well, and education. The theme of my own bills, I heard protecting democracy. That's one of the bills that I'm running this year. I'm running a bill on AI, or deepfake in elections. So it would require notice if you're using deepfake, and also it would give a cause of action if a candidate's image was used during the election and it was false. Another theme of my own bills are protecting children and family. I have quite a few bills in the early childhood space. I have 2 early childhood bills at this time, and I have 2 language access bills as well to help protect families and immigrant families as well. And I do also have a bill in education, which is a process for removing books from schools. Again, we've heard around the nation, Florida being a big instance where books are being removed from schools, and different communities, whether it's the Black community, the LGBTQ community, or even for other BIPOC communities being used in that space. So in Colorado here, we are lucky that we have a very progressive state with a progressive governor, but nonetheless, we have to make sure that all kids are protected and school remain a place where everyone can learn. I think that's about it. I'm just excited to be here, and I'll pass it on to my colleague.
That guy that nobody knows his name. My name is Kyle Brown. I'm a representative from House District 12. I represent Superior, Louisville, Lafayette, and then my district goes north up into Gun Barrel and Niwot. I've been a rep for about a year, and started in the middle of the session last year. Because of the district that I represent and the background that I have in insurance, I've been really focused on how we can learn the lessons of Marshall Fire and make it better for people when catastrophic events like that happen, so that it's easier for them to rebuild and get home. So I've been really fortunate to work with my colleagues here on this dais to make sure that we provide financial relief to folks And that we are helping to deal with the underinsurance problem, but also the skyrocketing cost of insurance that many people in our community are dealing with. This session, I am going to be focusing in the Marshall Fire space. I'm going to be focusing on the making sure that mortgage companies can't be a barrier to rebuilding, making sure that people who live in HOAs have the choice to have fire hardened materials on their homes. I'll also be working to make sure that in the aftermath of a natural disaster, that people cannot be gouged on their rent. Just like you can't be gouged on bottles of water or air conditioners, you shouldn't be able to be gouged on rent. I've also got, I have a long history with healthcare issues. Last year I passed some improvements to our public option plan. This year I'm going to be working on lowering the costs of healthcare so that when people's insurance companies go out of business, as Friday Health Plans did this summer, that they don't end up paying their deductibles twice. That has been happening to a lot of people. 30,000 people across the country, the state, excuse me, have been dealing with that. And we need to make sure that people are protected. I'm also, one thing that is a real concern in our community is the airport. Many people deal with airport noise, lead. Many, I didn't know this until I started doing this work, but piston engine aircraft like your Cessna, prop planes, they use leaded aviation fuel. And this is a danger to us, to our kids, to pregnant women. We need to find ways to accelerate our progress away from leaded aviation fuel. We also need to find ways to make sure that the airports and the communities can work together, that residents feel heard, and that they're not constantly being buzzed by touch and go landings that are putting people and their livelihoods and their mental health at risk. So I'll be working on ways that the state can help to improve this situation. We don't control the airspace, we don't control the land, but we do have some tools in our toolbox that we can use. Couple of other things that I hope to work on. I hope to be able to work on issues related to what happens when you lose a part of your home or you have significant smoke and ash damage. What are the standards that that your insurance should be remediating your home to? This has been a real struggle for a lot of the folks who thought they were lucky because their home was upstanding, and even 2 years later, they haven't been able to move back in. And then I'm going to be working to make sure to try to take advantage of some federal money that's on the table so that our Medicaid program can start paying for transitional housing for folks, as well as maybe some other supportive services like medically tailored needs. So those are some of the things that I'll be working on. So healthcare, and then I'll be partnering with some folks in the Senate on some climate related legislation as well. So those are my priorities. When I talk to people in my district, it's housing, it's the Marshall Fire, it's climate change, and it's healthcare, and those are the things that I'm going to be focusing on this year. So thanks very much for having me, and I'll make sure I wear a bigger name tag.
Of all things I will not forget, when your name, sir. When I sat on the diet at City Council, I was typically referred to as number 8. That was the number of my favorite program. Call me anything, but here I have number 8. I apologize again. None of us are going to okay. No worries. I'm just having fun. I never said I was going to ask 2 questions, but I think I'll save my second question for later, because that is such a rich collection of ideas. I'm guessing folks out here have their questions they might get asked, and if we have time, I'll ask a second question. But let's start right here. Thanks. And by the way, we have microphones going around. Here, we got.
Okay. obviously, affordable housing crisis is on top of most people's lists. I unfortunately was part of an organization, that's unfortunate, that started the rent control nuclear reaction by the Colorado Association back in 1881, when we were the Boulder Tenants Union. So the question is, I know most of you are likely working towards a repeal of rent control, which is the most effective tool that cities will have to keep rents to a reasonable level. Will you continue working on going toward a veto-proof majority of repealing rent control, or would you be willing to do a referendum to repeal rent control? And
These are easy questions to start with. Representative Kyle.
Well done, sir. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that comment. I think it's, one of the things about the conversation we had last year was, it was really about repealing of prohibition on local governments doing rent control. And one of the reasons that I supported the bill was because of the district that I represented, which is that, what we have seen in my district is, rents that skyrocket. I talked to a person the other day whose family has had to rent a house in Louisville for $11,000 a month. Another person that I talked to who was renting a house for $7,500 a month. These are not giant homes, by the way. The Louisville City Council itself, because of the prohibition, has no ability at this point to take this on. And to say, this is not consistent with our values. So it isn't true that if we were to pass something at the state level, that suddenly there will be rent control all across the state. It's more about giving communities one more tool in their toolbox to fight rising rents, and do things that are consistent with our values. So, I think that, with the governor's opposition, with some of the challenges that we faced in the legislature last year, repealing that prohibition is going to be challenging for the next couple of years. I don't think it'll come back this year. Your idea about a referendum is an interesting one. I'll have to think about that. But it's certainly within my values, and part of the reason I'm running not that this is rent control, but part of the reason why I'm running the price gouging of rent bill this year is to try to deal with this, what I can see as sort of taking advantage of people in their most in their most dire times, and that even if it's not purposeful and it's just the market doing what the market does, it doesn't mean that the market should be.
Other thoughts?
I did support that bill mentioned by Rick Brown last year, and I will certainly continue to support it because, again, we have to find ways to house working class community members. You mentioned referendum. I think whatever decision we decide to make from here on going forward, it has to be community driven. Rent control in a lot of the bills last year died because although most people here in Boulder support these type of policies, around the state, they're not supported. So how do we bring people to the table to have that bigger conversation and say you're all part of the solution and you need to buy-in? So that's part of it. And renters protection is very important. I passed renters protection last year for people who are on certain type of government assistance, such as TANF, SSI, and SSDI. So the elderly, pregnant women. So that's very important to make sure that people stay housed. Here in Boulder, we have a homelessness issue that we deal with. So how do we make sure that there's balance in the system where landlords are not to say that, let me put it nicely, let me think through this, that there is balance between the way landlords and renters communicate and engage so that we keep people housed, because when people fall into homelessness, the government has to pick up the tab. So, thank you.
So from the Senate perspective, Senator Hines,
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate that work. It's a great question. I actually earned my first governor's veto this past session, and it was on a bill that was related to ability for local communities to have the right of first refusal to purchase multi-unit buildings, which could be turned into affordable housing for renters. The question of how do we get it to be veto proof? I mean, we're doing everything we can to try to figure it out, because we are bringing that bill back again. I'm intrigued by the referendum idea also, but as you know, it takes so much money to put something on the statewide ballot, and it's also difficult to get, we're having even trouble getting a bill through both chambers and through the governor's desk. It's even bigger hurdle when you want to refer a measure from the legislature, and it requires even more support. So the probability of doing that in session, in this coming session, I think is going to be tough. But that's not to say that we can't build momentum. Many great policies that we've passed in Colorado two or three times. When you think of paid family leave, when you think of many healthcare policies, it took several attempts. So keep asking, keep pushing us. We're gonna continue to bring this back and try to work on it.
We ready to move on to the question? Yes, you.
I can use my big voice.
You're all.
Okay. Hi, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Bree Lehman. I want to say that I genuinely wholeheartedly support like everything that you guys find a priority. I absolutely support. I realize that it seems like I'm a single issue person, and I only am in that. Representative Brown is the only person who brought this up as one of their legislative priorities. East Boulder County, frankly, every Boulder County community is adversely impacted by this noise and airport pollution issue. And it's not just Rocky Mountain Metro Airport. There's an airport in Longmont, there's an airport in Erie, there's another airfield in Erie, there's an airport in Boulder. Last year, based on the avgas sales for the state of Colorado, 14,000 pounds of lead in microparticle size were released into the atmosphere in Colorado. So now that passes the blood-brain barrier and creates permanent damage for everybody, right? It's most problematic for kids who are touching surfaces, who are ingesting that material. This is not an idle issue. Tests in Superior, and I just found out that playground equipment was tested in Centennial near the airport, absolutely positive for swipes for this lead exposure. So I'm not here to say that we should close the airports. I understand that aviation is a very important part of Colorado and the industry. I think that we can absolutely have a balance, but it concerns me that all of you do not consider this a priority. Some of you were at the Attorney General's listening session here in October. There were over 500 people there. Obviously, this is a huge, significant concern to our community, and it touches on everything that you've all considered a priority. It touches on educational outcomes, on childhood health and development. Transportation dollars may be being spent on airports that provide little value to the community, where they could be better spent on transportation that serves a greater amount of people in our community. Children's learning is disrupted by noise. Our housing values, people's willingness to live in these communities is extremely adversely affected by these airport issues. And I'm concerned that nobody really seems, I mean, you've been in meetings, I've seen you all, but I guess what will it take for you to find this a priority in the next session and in every other possible scenario that we have to exercise some control over this issue?
So I'll just jump in real quick. Thanks for bringing it up. I will just say, first off, genuinely thank you for staying at it, being active. I can only imagine, honestly, the hell that so many people have been in, that are directly impacted in this way. So I hear you. I've heard many of my constituents at town halls, through emails, phone calls, meetings, etc. Over the years, but especially in the last 6 months. You know, part of the reason why the first thing I said was we were gonna touch on just about every issue you could possibly think of this session, because I knew there was. And I was gonna say, housing, transportation, education, food would be like, well, what about X? And that doesn't mean it's not important. I just wanted to sort of preface it of, we all have a lot of random things that we're working on right now, some of which nobody usually cares about. Some that are still probably important, right? And then some that are incredibly important to folks, and at various town halls, whatever, for whatever reason, it may just not come up immediately. But this is something that I am personally working on. I've been having a lot of conversations with it. We get mixed up with each other sometimes. We've been having a lot of conversations about this, and as Kyle said, you know this is complicated, because this is a federally preempted issue, generally speaking. There are some areas where we have some, and that's where we've been spending our time, looking into lately, maybe the Attorney General's office, etc. We have some ideas, we're working on things. The reason why I, right now, don't lead with this topic is because it's legally flawed. No matter what we do, we will be sued. You know that, right? Like the people who own airplanes are wealthy and they're litigious, and many of them are lawyers themselves. And it's probably more of a hobby and part of their culture of who they are, and they feel attacked. But at the end of the day, I will always side over the health and safety and well-being of families over some time. But I promise you, we are working on some legislation, some action. I know Representative Amabile was at that town hall a few months ago as well. Whatever we do, and this is going to be a huge thing. And we will need you and everybody to show up and have our backs to help us get this done. Many of our very well-meaning colleagues are not going to support Democrats because of the airports in their district, or there's a lot of economic gain for certain counties.
We can have hope.
Yep, I agree. And so we're working on it. I'd love to talk more. I'm not shouting from the rooftops my ideas and exactly what I'm working on, because I don't want everyone on the opposition poking holes in it before we have it drafted and vetted. But it's something that I have heard loud and clear. And I think there are multiple ways we can go at it. It's not going to get solved. And I'm just, and you know that, but I'm just being honest. Like, I don't want to promise something we can't deliver when already we know this is such a complicated legal area. I'll just say briefly, I have a 4-year-old, I have a year and a half. A few months ago, routine doctor visit, my year-and-a-half-year-old tested very high for that. I know what families and parents feel when they get that result. And then the health department sends you a letter, like you're a bad parent. And they say, you're now on the list of your child has high lead. Like, obviously they don't say what the hell you do as a parent, but you feel it. And lead exposure at certain levels is not reversible. It will impact that child for the rest of their life. And I only share that because these things are so incredibly personal for everybody in this area. And I get it. And so I promise you, it's something that's everyone can sort of do.
Yeah, thank you. So I just want to echo what Jeff Brown said and what Senator Fenberg said, and yes, I was at the town hall and was completely blown away by the amount of people who came and the passion that they expressed. But I wasn't surprised, because I have been invited to people's homes in Superior to sit out in their backyards And to hear this noise, you cannot have a conversation. And I know many of you in the room haven't experienced this, but there is literally a plane taking off every minute, 24 hours a day, flying very low over people's homes. And the places I went to, they have beautiful backyards, and they cannot even go out there because it is so loud. You can't talk on the phone out in your yard, and you can't have a conversation with your family. So I'm sorry that I didn't mention it, although I will tell you that one of the reasons is that I know that Rev Brown is taking the lead on these bills. And I absolutely have been talking to him about, I keep calling him up and telling him, well, what about doing it this way instead?
And I say, okay.
And I think we all know it is a huge big deal. And we absolutely have to solve it. And when I hear people say, well, like when the news came out about the lawsuit, there was a lot of stuff on Twitter about, well, you bought a home next to an airport. But that is not a good rationale for letting these airports really poison and destroy people's lives. Things have changed so dramatically since people bought their homes. In the last 2 or 3 years, they have upped the number of flights tenfold out of these airports. And we have got to do something about it, so.
Thank you. Thank you for asking that question, and thank you for challenging us. And I sit on the environment and energy committee, and well, supporting Red Brown, thus far I have supported all the bills, I believe. But I'll certainly be supporting him, and that's part of the work that we do here. We may highlight the bill, but ultimately, in order for the bill to pass, all of us who sit here have to support it. I mean, I know I have to go to Red Brown and ask him for his vote. I have to go to Representative Amabile and ask her an appropriation to vote for my bills and go down the line. So ultimately, even though he's the person highlighting the bill, but ultimately, we all will end up supporting the bill. So I look forward to supporting him, and I think the bigger question as well, as you were talking, is air quality. And I will be certainly, hopefully, Mark is back there. I'm working on air quality bill. I will not talk too much about it right now because it hasn't been introduced. There's still work being done around that. But yes, it's important. Air quality is about also environmental justice. We know who lives around in certain areas where the air quality is even worse. So I will be working on that, and I will certainly be supporting Rick Brown and his legislation. Thank you.
Any other comments? Next question.
Oh.
So we're gonna be into the.
Hello, my name is Stuart Gordon. I want to thank you for all the things you're doing, especially fully funding education. It's very important, so thank you for doing that. One of the things that I didn't hear much about, I work with the Boulder Police Department, I didn't hear anything about policing. And Judy, you and I had a conversation. So can you highlight some of the things you're doing and others of you? Because, you know, I know because you didn't mention it's not happening, but I'd like the room to hear some of those things. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start and I'll brief. So yes, I do have I have several bills that are around the intersections of mental health and criminal justice. And one of those bills that we were talking about has to do with the term and the use by police of the terms excited delirium. And oftentimes what happens is at a scene where someone is potentially being arrested, this police or a paramedic will say, oh, I think this person has excited delirium. Well, it turns out that isn't a medical diagnosis. It isn't recognized by any of our physician societies as a medical diagnosis of any kind. And what the police are currently being trained on is that if you have excited delirium, it means the person has superhuman strength, that they're violent, that they are going to respond in this big way. And so you have to, as a police officer, you have to respond in a very aggressive way. And so it turns out that this training is causing police to use force in a way that isn't really needed. And we've seen time and time again, especially in communities of color, people being harmed or killed as a result of having somebody say that person has excited delirium. So we're gonna have a bill this session. I'm working on it with Rep. Herod and Senator Buckner and Senator Gonzalez. It says we're taking that term out of training for law enforcement, out of the training for paramedics and first responders. We're asking coroners can no longer use that as a cause of death. And instead, we're saying you can describe behaviors that you see, but you cannot make a diagnosis when that's not your bailiwick or your thing that you've been trained in. So that's one of the specific things that I'm working on, but a lot of these bills are about public safety, and they are about making sure that people who are in a mental health crisis are brought to care rather than locked up in jail for extended periods of time.
Senator Jaquez Lewis.
Thank you, Tim. Stuart, thank you so much for the question. It's great to see you, and I want to thank you for stepping up to serve our community by being a candidate in this last election, and I hope you continue your service to the community because we need it. Last summer, I served on 5 interim committees. So for those of you that might not know, we have committees that continue the work when we're not in session so that we can be addressing all the different topics that you're hearing about today. This past interim, I served on 4 committees, and the one that I wanted to comment on based on your question, which is so key to helping law enforcement, is the opiate and substance abuse interim committee. We heard on every single meeting from law enforcement that are struggling with folks in the community that are dealing with substance abuse and substance addiction. As a pharmacist, I saw it a lot in the community. We divided our roles into 4 different areas, but I will be presenting a bill with my colleagues on prevention and treatment. And I think that's really going to help. Longmont, that I'm really proud to represent, was one of the first communities in the state to have the core group, the co-responder group. We're going to build upon that and try to increase that in other communities. And I think that's really going to help law enforcement. But you're right on with the question. We have to do more to not only help law enforcement with these tough issues that are making their work so much harder, but we have to help communities really get to those goals of helping the community safety beyond putting it all on law enforcement.
Thank you so much. As a former member of city council, I know, or at least I understand that community policing is really a community issue that involves city council in having a conversation with community members. I am bringing 2 bills that are in the criminal justice space. One of them is how young people and children are treated in our juvenile justice system. A lot of times you don't hear about that. You hear about how adults are treated in the system, but not used. So I'm working on that bill, and I'm excited. And if you're available and you want to know more about my bills, please reach out to me, because having community members here in Boulder who come and testify on these bills are extremely important. And part of the bill as well helps ensure that LGBTQ+ kids are also protected. Again, marginalized kids who enter the systems, they don't make them better. But what can we do through certain processes to help these young people? And also, I have another bill that I'm working on. I'm still having a stakeholder meeting on that bill. I'm an attorney by trade, so I've done some work in the administration of justice, which is very important when we think of the rule of law, right? In that bill, basically what it does, currently, if a DA's office, the DA is missing or that spot is vacated, the governor can appoint. Currently, with the governor's appointment, that AG doesn't have access to the budget. So that means during that time that the AG is the current DA or the state prosecutor, if you don't have access to the funds to even buy a pencil, what is that doing when it comes to access to justice for people who are already in the system or going through the court system? So the idea is to make sure that the state prosecutor, who's the AG, would have access to the budget to be able to hire. So to make sure that the process goes smoothly, much smoothly, so that people can come, enter, and quickly exit the system, as opposed to this bottleneck where people are staying in the system and waiting. So these are the two bills that I'm working on, and please reach out if you have any questions, concerns, and you want to talk to me about these bills. Thank you.
You have comments on this? Any questions?
Sure. Oh, well, it was sort of random coming out here, but I've learned a lot today. Thank you. First, as a parent of 4 and 2-year-old, I live across the airport, but I never had any idea that that is happening and that maybe my kids have kids issues could be related to that perhaps. So thank you for bringing that, and I recommend my representatives work with Kyle, please. I will support it, and I definitely. So I definitely support that, and I think I will become more vocal, and I'll probably talk to Erie Airport Council, what do they do and stuff, so I can do my local work, but I would like your support on the state level as well. So that's one issue, and another issue is we have not talked about transportation, and it sounds like it's a railroad project that perhaps goes from Colorado Springs to Fort Collins and stuff. And I do have concerns with it. While I do love what has been done with electric vehicles and sustainability and stuff, I drove one here as well. Will there be enough demand? Because almost any community that has successfully pulled off a railroad or some sort of subway system, or, you know, you need a lot of demand, and the way population is distributed between those places is very sparse. It's like Denver, this and this, but in between there is nothing. And how many people actually go back and forth? Will it be relying on freight? How is it going to work? And where will funding come from? That's my question.
Representative.
Thank you for the question. I have asked all of these questions myself at committee. I'm on the House Transportation Committee and served on the interim committee with Senator Jaquez Lewis. No, I think we're the only two. Yes. So I think when we talk about rail transportation, we have to talk about two different but very related efforts. One is more of a commuter rail-based solution. So we're talking about Denver to Boulder to Longmont, this sort of Northwest passage that I do believe there is a strong demand for. I know I would use it if it was there. I know others would use it if it was there as well. And for that, I do believe that there is a strong demand and ridership in place. When we talk about front range passenger rail, I've asked these questions myself of who is that person who takes the train from Pueblo to Fort Collins, and what are they doing when they get there, right? Like, what would be that purpose? And so I do think we get a lot of, we have this thought of kind of a hub and spoke, right? There's probably a lot of people going from Denver to Fort Collins and back, right? That those could be commuters, they could be students. There's a lot of ridership there. Pueblo to Denver. Are we having people ride all the way up and down the rail? Unclear. And I think that there needs to be, there have been studies done on what that ridership looks like. But one of the things that will be important is that if the communities want front range passenger rail, we have to ensure that there is local transportation in place at the stops along the way, because no one's gonna take the train from Pueblo to Longmont if once they get to Longmont, they're stuck at the train station and there's nowhere to go, right? Or there's no rental car agency to get the rental car for that local transportation that they need. Like, I lived in Europe for many years, so I have that sort of European mindset of how this could all potentially work. But we have to work on the local transportation solutions, and we cannot expect the state to come and solve all the problems for us. And so that's, I think, where I want to leave that comment, is we really have to be thinking about this as a community solution.
There are many aspects of transportation, the other comments.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of that. Look, at the end of the day, we need much bigger investments in transit options, and I mean like all of the above options, right? So bus is gonna be actually the most realistic, practical, and probably heavily used for people on a daily basis. We need to do better. I think most people don't use RT, right? The people that do, I think often are like, that was okay. not, you know, RT is not evangelizing people into becoming huge fans of RT. I think we need to do better, and there are a lot of conversations at the state level with RT on how to do that. Some of it's government, some of it's funding. But when it comes to rail, it can't be the solution, but it is part. And it serves different purposes, as the representative was saying, for the fast tracks projects, which some communities got, some didn't, is serves a different purpose than what from the rail serve. And I don't think there's a lot of people out there who want to. And I know you said Colorado Springs, I won't tell my friends in Pablo that you got that. I don't know who's going to Buffalo all the time. I don't know if anyone's going to Buffalo regularly, but it's meant to sort of be a backbone of a larger system, right? And hopefully there could be a mountain aspect of it too, mountain rail that connects the front range to mountain communities. And there's a lot of but these different aspects serve different purposes. At the end of the day, we don't have a statewide transportation system really right now, and we need one. The reason why we're talking about rail, A, is because several communities are paying for it, and they never got what they're promised, right? And there's literally one significant, and it's increasing every year. And so what do we do? Do we finally just say, hey, we should all admit it's never gonna happen? Some people would say that. I think if we do that, then we can never ask voters again for funding for transportation, because they will say, look what you did last time. I think it's a problem politically, and for people to have confidence in government and to do big things. I do think there's a way to use that money effectively now to finally get the fast track segments finished for folks that are maybe still waiting around and expecting it. And have it be part of this larger conversation that is going on in the White House in Congress with all the federal infrastructure. That there's billions of dollars that the government is begging states to ask for. And I would rather us get it and complete some big legacy projects for Colorado than, Kansas. So at the end of the day, there's a ton of money on the table. We should grab it and use it as part of this long-term strategy that some of us have different feelings on, but at the end of the day, I think it's good for Colorado. It's good for Buffalo because we'll need to lose any time. Thanks, people like friends. That's
Yeah, just real quick on the transportation topic, I also think that we are seeing more and more opportunities for people to participate in using e-bikes and seeing that our roadways and areas to utilize bikes in a safe way is really important with the push towards getting out of your car and being more active and using a mode of transportation that does multiple things without adding to our climate issue. And so I'm happy to see some of our communities, Denver and locally, take that into consideration as they're planning so that the folks that really do want to move towards an active form of transportation can do so. So I wanted to, again, it's a holistic look at what are all the different transportation options that we have with our electric vehicles, electric bicycles, rail. How do we make it work for everyone in a safe way as we look to the future? So just wanted to mention the bike part of this discussion.
I just wanted to add, as we're talking about e-bikes, fun fact, they didn't know this until unfortunately one of our colleagues was in an accident on an e-bike and she was wearing a regular helmet. And so I just want to take this opportunity to let you know that regular helmets are not safe for e-bikes. They're rated, and I'll get the miles per hour wrong, but they're rated to a certain mile per hour, but e-bikes are at this higher level. So in addition to local governments creating safe spaces for e-bikes, we want to just make sure that everyone is getting a safe helmet if you are using an e-bike. So, thank you.
Yeah, one question from the
Yes.
afternoon. Right here.
I think I can just use my my name is Anna, and this does relate to the previous question about transportation. Sorry to drag it on. This is actually specific to RTD, which I know is not under your direct control, and I've gotten that information from several people I've contacted. So I respect that. I'm just gonna use my personal example because I think it's representative, or can be. I actually love RTD. I live in Superior, which is a transit hub. I live a mile from the McCaslin station. I used to take the FF4, which I biked or walked to. It took me from the McCaslin station to the junction, and I work a quarter mile from that junction. And there were a lot of students who took that bus in the morning because it stopped at Colorado, which is the underpass to CU. This may sound like a pretty Boulder County specific thing, but I guess my question is, with transportation, with all the talk we have about influx to Boulder or Boulder County, does the state have any pressure we can put to help our DD recover from COVID? Because I understand, you know, it was suspended, the FF4 was suspended. I'm glad they brought the FF2 back. I use the FF1 regularly on my way home if it's too windy to bike all the way. So I'm wondering, are there tools to get this bike, you know, this bus service to be more robust? I think the FF4 is widely used. So I guess that's my question. It may be too specific for this, you know, arena. Is there a quick answer for what tools we have?
Thank you, Anna, for that question. As someone who would ride the FF4 every day if it was in place, because this is, for those of you who don't know, this is the line that goes from Boulder straight to Civic Center, where the Capitol is, and it was suspended during COVID, and has not come back into operations. Yes, on bringing back the FF4. It is a symptom of the larger problem in that we cannot recruit enough bus drivers to bring all of the routes back. That said, we have had multiple conversations through the committee, through the transportation committee with RTD about prioritizing regional bus lines that are not served by any transportation, like alternative means of transportation, over increasing capacity on shorter lines, right? Like, because there was a time for a few years when we were putting more buses on routes that leave every 15 minutes so that they could leave every 8 minutes, right? Or 10 minutes, instead of
reinstating routes that don't exist at all if it's not in place, right? There's no other transportation. 81 is another good example, the one that goes to the airport. I ride the 81 to the airport frequently. It's my primary means of transportation to and from the airport, and it is standing room only every single time that I'm on it. Imagine being standing room only on a bus that's going 80 miles an hour down the E470, right? This is not safe, right? And there's plenty of ridership to increase expansion. It is almost purely a matter of driver capacity. So what do we need to do? We need to get more people to be bus drivers and want to be bus drivers. How do we do that? Sure, we can pay them more, but the payment's pretty good. We need to get people to stop harassing our bus drivers, right? Because bus driver harassment and violence is the #1 reason people are leaving, right? They're getting attacked on the RTD lines. That's not okay. That's a mental health issue too, right? That we also need to address. We have to see it as a sort of systemic. But to your specific question on what can we do about it, keep putting pressure on RTD. There will be an effort coming forward this session to look at the governance of RTD. And in that, it will provide more voices to local governments and to local communities like ours to have more influence on that. And so I think, I haven't seen the details yet. In general, I support the principle of it, but we have to see exactly what comes forward in the legislation. But then let's look at restructuring RTD so that local communities have more control, right, over the routes that they think serve their community. And then let's look at keeping the pressure up on the RTD governance board. And then of course, just supporting more efforts to get people on transportation and be civil and kind when they're on it, so that we get more people who want to be a part of it as both riders and employees.
Yeah, I mean, we could probably have a whole town hall just on, not even transportation, but on RTD. And like you said, it would be maybe interesting, but none of us actually have the authority to do anything about RTD, but that said, I mean, I think the multitude of issues, and it's different by region, by line, by bus line. You know, the problems in urban Denver are probably different than the problems on the forward. You know, it's a diverse system. I think in some ways that might be the problem, that it's so big. And maybe smaller systems would have been smarter. It's obviously difficult to re-engineer it, because then people get left out, and it's kind of a mess. The governance stuff is an issue. I mean, last election, we had some seats where no one ran. There was no candidate. So then like a write-in candidate got in there. And I'm not speaking poorly about this person, but I don't think that's how you get the best public servant, right? It was just like, well, my neighbor, well, my neighbor. So now I'm on the board. And so, you know, we gotta look at that. I mean, I think there are a lot of conversations around finances and sustainability, and you know, the RTD owns a ton of land, really valuable property. And I don't think they like capitalize on that or use that to their advantage to their help with the system. There are a lot of things, you know, they're not really incentivized to increase ridership. They're not really incentivized for a rider to have a good experience, because they're largely funded by taxpayers, not fare laws, right? So, I mean, you think about that, like, every time I get on the bus, there's a problem, like, oh yeah, they don't really have a business model to care about the experience. They're just like, gotta remove. And so like, whenever I try to get on the bus to the airport, and it's like, they're like, sorry, you're full. I said, well, how did you, like, we knew Thanksgiving was coming. And every year, I show up and you're telling me it's full, and there's no other bus. Why wouldn't you surge up? But you're just turning people into like, I'm never doing that again. And so like, we need to think about how can they be better about customer service? Because right now, they're not really, their models is incentivized to care about.
Any other observation, comment, questions? Right there, man.
Hey, I want to thank so many of you. I look at the tow truck work that you've done. I watch, what you've got in the news. I really appreciate so much. I live in Gun Barrel. And I've got the airplane issues, but I also have a bigger personal issue, and I really can't even give the details now. I would love to personally do it. I live in the Gun Barrel area. What are you doing to protect us from over-aggressive HOAs? I would really need to continue to talk to someone.
HOAs. Over-aggressive HOAs. Oh, yeah.
Anybody had their experience with HOA? That's awesome.
Thank you for the question. Last session, I ran with Representative Capone from Arvada, a bill that did pass and created an HOA and Metro District Task Force. It is currently meeting. I have pulled bill title on an HOA bill that is yet to be described to run the results of that task force. So the HOA task force, we're expecting to have recommendations by the end of January. The Metro District Task Force, which I personally sit on, will be extended out towards like March, April timeframe. So we may not get any legislation on Metro Districts this session, but certainly are there next session. Yes, we are aware of all of the concerns about HOAs. Things that the task force is looking at right now is alternative mediation methods, timings on, like architectural review requests, like how much time your HOA has to respond, how much time you have to respond. Some work has already been done in terms of liens and foreclosures, caps on the, fees that can be levied against your home on an annual basis and so forth. That work's already been done, but it hasn't necessarily, we haven't seen the results of it trickle down yet. But the work is coming. And if you as a member of the public want to participate, those HOA and Metro District task forces meet on alternating Mondays. I think 2 p.m. And so just go to the DORA, it's called DORA, the Department of Regulatory Agencies. They have a division of real estate underneath that. You just, honestly, if you just Google Colorado HOAs, division of real estate, it'll come up. And you can get all of those meeting agendas and you can participate in public.
Representative Kyle Allen.
I just wanted to say, I really appreciate the work that Representative Parenti and Representative Tatone from Jefferson County have been doing on this issue. For me, this has been a real issue in our area related to rebuilding in a resilient way, right? We have HOAs in the mountains, in the Vail area that until very recently required wooden shingle roofs, right? That's not safe in terms of fire resistance. We have made some progress. We've passed some bills around xeriscaping, but I think the foreclosure issue in particular that we've become more aware of is really difficult. So I'm going to continue to work on HOA issues and partner and take the lead of my colleagues.
Just a quickie follow-up.
Well,
Sorry. I'm so sorry.
So with apologies, we get this one last question out and we're back to the 11:30.
I don't think that's too much time, a couple of minutes, what happened to talk about. But first I will say, I very much appreciate Representative Abile's comments around mental health, and not what we generally talk about. I have a 17-year-old daughter who had a mental health crisis, not the first time. And there's no place to take children who are having mental health crises. There are no beds there. And there's nothing to do, and it's related to this whole other drug issue. They are self-medicating. You can go to any park near a school and you can find these children. And unless you do something about it, it's gonna get worse. So anything you can do to help our children who have mental health crises, you need to really work on. A couple of things, very quickly, the social media thing, I'm sorry, that horse left the barn. Other things, I'm a business advocate, and the Democrats never talk about business. And we have Latino businesses, which is the largest one, entrepreneurial section in our community. They are not getting the support they need. And you need to start talking about how we equitably distribute resources to these businesses that are hiring local people and doing great work. Labor law, the wage theft is still an issue. It's related to the immigration issue. It's not being dealt with or talked about at the state level, in my opinion. Lastly, the bipartisanship really needs to come through. The Democrats in my community are viewed as having an air of arrogance with your supermajority, and it's not breathing down. It feels like people are being that there's a bulliness going on, the same type of thing that happens in red states where they have supermajorities, and we cannot let it happen to the party here. It's discouraging to me, and I think you need to really talk about it. You don't represent 100% of the people. So, thank you.
Okay, there are a few responses there. Karen, sorry.
Yeah, I've been too quiet, so I need to speak up. I just really appreciate that because, when I first ran for office, I had run a business, literally within walking distance of this building, for 16 years. And as a business owner, people were shocked to hear that I was a Democrat and a business owner. I'm like, Democrats can own businesses. This is ridiculous that we think of it this way. And, I actually wanted to be on the business committee when I was first running because I had this experience of employee and employer relationships are synergistic. They need each other, just like landlords and tenants need each other. And for us to make some of these issues into truly a binary discussion is not true to reality. And I grew up in a Republican family. My dad was in the military for 30 years. I was a Republican at one point. And so these labels that we tend to put on each other are causing us the inability to communicate, to respectfully listen to each other with compassion, and to sit down at a table and look at the solutions that we might have and decide on which way to move forward. So I so appreciate your comments. It's one of the big reasons I ran for office in the first place, because I was afraid and concerned enough about the future of our democracy if we don't start talking to each other. And it is incredibly important, and we work very hard to get our bills to be bipartisan. Our supermajority does cause some issues, and it's difficult, and I don't want the Democratic Party to become like the Republican Party, where we start infighting and we're not able to get things done. And that can happen when you get so many diverse voices in a room that are kind of typically considered to be on one side. So I promise you that I am there. I'm not one of the more vocal people down in the Capitol, but I am, nose to the grindstone, working behind the scenes, talking to people, building relationships, making sure that I get voices of reason to the room to be able to work on problems for the people of Colorado. So thank you for that. We continue to make our relationships with our local chambers. I'm in constant contact with the Longmont Chamber of Commerce and visiting the businesses there. It's really important to me because small business is what drives our whole country, honestly. And I really want to make sure that our Colorado environment is friendly for that.
Representative Joseph.
Oh,
Representative.
put the mic and throw it up there.
So,
I just wanted to add, yes, we're working on the mental health high acuity. I was on the child welfare interim committee. Please reach out to me and we can talk more about that bill. Actually, there are several bills. And there's also a bill on wage theft that is coming, and thank you for bringing that question up because you can hear my accent. I am a child of immigrants, and as well, I was born in Haiti, so I understand and I've seen firsthand some of those challenges that a lot of our immigrant population have dealt with, and the fact that they are taken advantage of because sometimes our system doesn't protect them. And also, I wanted to add, I remember our governor, when I first got elected last year, he said, he wanted us to work on bipartisan legislation. And I was standing there as a Democrat and a new lawmaker, I was like, oh my God, he said that. Because that was not my, at least that was not my understanding coming in. And when I heard him said that, I was like, okay, then that is my mission. Every bill that I'm introducing this year, I have reached out to Republicans to get them on the bill. But at this time, I have not been successful. I do have one bill right now with a Republican on them. So at the end of the day as well, I reach out to Republicans. I don't always get them on my bills, but several of my bills last year had Republicans on them. Thank you.
I'll be really quick. Thank you so much for your comments, and I will comment back on everything you said, but first I'll talk about being a business owner and being the chair of the business committee. Last year, we killed a Democrat bill in the business committee because many of us felt that this was going to be very damaging to a whole segment of business that provides a huge amount of economic vitality to our communities. And it's unfortunate that we couldn't have come to some kind of compromise. But I just want to say that, yes, I am willing, and I know other people are willing to say no to things that we think are bad policy. Doesn't matter who brings it. That it really has to be about us considering all of our constituents and saying, what is the best path forward? And we're not going to pass bills that are going to have a lot of unintended consequences, not helping they're intended to help and actually hurt those same people. So, and then the second thing I want to say is that the drug problem is massive and our kids are really being harmed by self-medicating. And one of the things that I'm very committed to continuing to work on is access to high potency marijuana for kids, access to alcohol for kids, access to other intoxicants that our kids should not have access to. And it is really hard, but it is something I think that is a matter of statewide concern that we should all bring.
Thank you so much. Pete, thank you for the question. You're such a champion for our Latina community. 2 years ago, we did a very important bill. We removed the barriers to folks mostly in our Latino community to getting business licenses. There was a lot of discrimination going on based on some previous laws that had been passed in 2006, and we removed those barriers, so we were able to allow folks who wanted to go open a food truck, or who wanted to do a childcare center, who wanted to do a hair salon, they could now get the business licenses that they needed. So that was a very important bill, and actually the League of Women Voters really helped with that bill, and I thank you for that. The other thing, Pete, that I wanted to let you know is 2 years ago, I, along with several colleagues, ran I think it was the third wage theft bill. Well, guess what? We found out that it wasn't enough. So we're coming back again. Majority Leader Durand and myself and 2 other colleagues are running the wage theft bill to go after the brokers who are attracting the workers to be in construction and to be in these jobs, and then they are taking their wages and not paying them for the overtime and not paying them for the work that they have done, because they're keeping the money. And even though the contractors may not know this is going on, we want to make sure that everyone is accountable all the way up the chain so that people will be paid for the work that they've done. So thank you for bringing up wage theft. We're going to continue to work on it, and I hope we can get it passed and everyone to support that. Thank you.
Actually, the last one, the benediction for all that.
Well, Pete, you submitted like 12 different topics and questions, so it's hard to figure out where to end. But I just want to make a comment on one of the last things you said about the fact that Democrats are a super majority and how we're handling that stuff. But I think for one, the Senate's not a super majority. We're close. We're one seat away from the super majority, and it's fine. I don't think we need a super majority, actually. The House does have supermajority, but I think it's a point that's really important. Because especially in town hall settings in Boulder, you don't hear a sentiment very often. If anything, sometimes you hear the opposite. You have a supermajority, why the hell aren't you using it more? Is probably what we hear more often, but I think it's important because, and it speaks to the problems and the moment we're living in that we talked about at the very beginning of this morning. I am, I think, one of 2 Democrats left in the legislature that's ever served in. Every other Democrat only knows what it's like to serve. And, you know, that I'm not saying I'm better than anybody because of it, I'm saying it is interesting to me that, it does change how you legislate and you work with the other side of the aisle and think about like whether you could be in the minority overnight or not, because you can be. You know, my first 2 years as a minority, I didn't get much of anything done, but it helped me, it forced me to build relationships and navigate the system to understand how it works. That is paying off for the rest of my political career. Most legislators don't have that benefit because they got in there, maybe with a supermajority, they still have a supermajority, and they can, whatever they do, they're probably gonna get really well. Like, you know, not all of them, some people have a really hard election, but they're probably not gonna lose the majority. But I still think it's important to remember what you said, which is we still live in a divided country, and this is still a divided state. It is not a blue state. It's bluer. But I don't think those voters in Highlands Ranch that elected a Democrat the first time maybe ever in their lives are Democrats. They're just responding to the national environment and really didn't want to vote for a Republican. I don't think that means all of a sudden Highlands Ranch is a blue county or blue area. So I think we need to keep that in mind and remember that we as legislators, our job is to represent every one of our constituents, not just the ones that have a seat for the party. It doesn't mean you have to do everything they ask for, if they want you, you're not going to please them most of the time. You still have to represent them. And I think sometimes we've lost a little bit of that in the general assembly lately because of the fact that we have certain Democrats. We've lost sight of it. And we're influenced by the national environment, you know, the polarization and all the fighting that happens nationally. The last thing I'll say is, when you get to a place where there's a supermajority, it's strange, but you start, the Republicans were basically irrelevant. They sort of made this, so I'm not really too sorry, but it means that we start, whether we realize now we're not bad people, but we start competing with each other rather than with them. And that changes how you legislate and how you represent. Because now you're trying to outshine or next to your colleagues that you actually agree with. And it becomes less about governance and more about competition in some ways. I think that changes the dynamic in Capitol. We have to be very careful of that. Because unfortunately, when you're at a 2/3 majority, you actually have that much more of a responsibility to focus on governance. Is whatever bill you or your colleagues introduces, if you're a Democrat, it's very likely to pass. And that means you have an immense amount of power and really have to be careful not messing up. And I'm not saying we have, I'm just saying I'm really glad that you said it at the end because I think it's very important. At the end of the day, we are mere servants for a couple of years in an institution that has to outlive our services. And the way we do it, I think is going to help inform if these institutions and democratic principles people want to address. But I appreciate you mentioning that it's an important point.
You join me in thanking this group of to this group this morning and to all of the constituents who are not. I want to say thanks to the league, get the league around. Are still out there, would be worth doing this again if we could bring this revision out. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Jim. I'm grateful for your help today as moderator. And thank you all for participating, making this event successful. And thank you for this ability. It was great.